Hello, everybody, and welcome to Spotlight Indie. I'm your host, Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd. And as always, I'm joined by H.L. Tinsley, who is still glorious and also generally okay. Holly, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. That's a very. It feels like a weird juxtaposition, glorious and generally okay. But I like it.
Or we could just make that generally glorious.
Generally
Yes.
glorious.
Yeah, that
Yes.
works. Well, generally glorious, but not all the time because that's too much pressure.
I think that might be too long to put as a tag. Just generally glorious. That's all fine.
Yeah.
Just leave that as the tag. Yeah. And then just a little footnote caveat thing. We don't need to know what the caveat is. It's all good.
That's it. You don't need to explain. We need Frasier. How are you? We never ask how you are.
I'm awesome. You know this to be true. Like your base level is awesome, and then it goes up from there. It's all good.
This is true.
Joining us is the marvelous dragon author that is JE Hannaford. Jenny, how are you doing?
I'm feeling quite draconic this evening. Thank you.
Excellent. That's very good to hear. Just as long as you don't breathe fire on us, that's the main thing. I'm not fireproof.
No.
You can aim it at Frasier.
Nor's my laptop, to be honest, and I don't really want to set this on fire. It's too shiny.
I want to ask you just before we get into the question that we've got for this week for there's no such thing as a stupid question. I just want to ask you about your writing process with having a family and having that space where you're having to do it in a shared area, because I'm exactly the same. I don't have like a desk where I write from. It's all done in between times with the people around. How did you get into your groove with that? How did you get it so that you were doing consistent output?
Well, it's easier to do when your kids are smaller. My son is 10. So he's in the lounge playing on the computer, which does make things kind of tricky. He's also up later. So while he was younger, it was much easier. Sometimes I'll retreat to the bedroom. I've got a lap desk, the proper lap desk, and I'll just sit with my legs in front of me, put my laptop on there, put some earplugs in if someone else is home, and just try and write. As soon as the weather turns, I move outside. So I write. We've got a table just outside on the patio, just outside the back of the kitchen door, and as soon as the weather turns, I write outside. Normally, that's my retreat from the noise, but I have the window open, I can hear. Slightly harder this year because it turned out the puppy we got at Christmas will eat any and everything. So it's not actually very relaxing to sit out there because I was constantly pulling bulbs, plants, things, leaves, anything she could find from her mouth, earthworms. It didn't matter. If it was out there, it went in her mouth. So it wasn't quite the normal level of relaxing outside this year. I ended up doing quite the opposite. I'm hoping she's kind of growing out of that. So I usually like having all pot plants. They're all flowering and it's lovely, and I can hear the wind and I can feel the wind and I can hear the bees, and that actually goes into my writing, because quite often if you feel the wind across your face in the book, that's because I just felt it, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're outside, yeah, they might feel a breeze, they might feel this, they might feel that, hear the rustling of the leaves, because I'm surrounded by outside, and most of the time our characters are outside. A lot of the time they're not all necessarily inside, certainly in mine. So where I can, I'm out there. I also have, I would say, the privilege of working part-time. I've been teaching for a long time, so I'm in a position where I was able to come down part-time. And my husband does the heavy lifting in that respect. So I have 2 days at home where there are no children in the house. He does work from home, but he works in another room, and where I can get the admin done, get some writing done. And I also have an incredible group of people in my Discord who have been continuing along, and at this moment in time will have, I'm quite sure, just completed an hour's sprint, because at about 8:30, when my son starts heading towards bed every night, one of them sets off a Discord sprint for an hour.
That's awesome.
And as many people as are free and available will join in. And there's a group of us that will sit down and write. They've written a lot more than me recently. I see it there and I have guilt if I'm still dealing with other stuff or I'm marking them. But the fact that they see it there, it's that constant thing. And like last night, I couldn't join them for it. but I could see it. And I sat down. I managed to sit down as they were finishing, and then I still posted my word count in the chat. I gave myself a half an hour because I couldn't get much more out of it yesterday. It was a bit manic with schoolwork. But I was then able to post my, I think I managed 530 words in half an hour or something. So I just put something down, and at least it felt like I'd moved the story forward a little bit. But yeah, once the weather gets better and I can move outside, things tend to move a lot quicker. But yeah, I have got a desk, but it's a folding desk. So it's an old bureau style shelf thing. And so it folds up and it folds down. It's in some of my pictures online. So it's green kind of wood. It's like little writing desk, like an old bureau, bookshelves underneath it. So it doesn't take up much space, but it's my space.
Yeah, I love that.
So, but yeah, when I can, I try and write indoors in the winter, but I don't get much done in the winter. Combination of the space, everybody, it being dark, the fact I can't write outside, everybody's kind of trying to share this one room. That sounds like it's just, we thought an open plan was brilliant until the plague that shall not be named. And then after that, we suddenly realized the problems of all trying to live in one room with one desk, one piano, a television, the console, the dining table, and my desk, 2 desks in the same room. And it's just, it doesn't work. It's really difficult, but everybody works around each other as best we can.
Yeah. It sounds like you've got it all sorted. That's great. So basically,
it doesn't feel like it.
So if anybody's reading your books and a character is pulling something out of the mouth of somebody, that I assume is a reference to your puppy.
Probably referencing to. Yeah, I mean, you say that Sorrow was, there is a dog in Sorrow called Swift. And my dog passed away as I was writing Sorrow, and my dog had the same lumps and tumours that Swift does. Oh. So it was part of the kind of, yeah, so Swift is very much a tribute to him. So yeah, sometimes things are very much as they are, which is why that book was so hard to write, because you're introducing a character that I introduced before he passed, and then I had to stick with that character because I'd then introduced it, and then I had to finish that storyline, having lost my own Swift, effectively. His name wasn't Swift, but you know. But yeah, so sometimes, quite often, certainly outside noises. I don't know that anyone's had to pull anything out of anyone's mouths, particularly dog-wise. I mean, there are enough dogs that you could be pulling things out of their mouths, but they certainly get in as much trouble as mine does.
No, I think it takes a great amount of courage to keep writing when something like that happens, and I'm very proud of you for doing it because it's not easy. So well done, Jenny. And in terms of, I think what you're saying about your bureau, I want to come back to that because I had this pact with my wife that as soon as I became like a proper writer and released a proper book, I could write at a bureau. We were going to get a bureau, I could write there. Now the house is completely done. There's no space for furniture. There's no space for a bureau. And so there's this pact that we've made is just, it's waiting to be fulfilled. But
this is a tweak. So this is a bookshelf. It's about it should be about a 4-shelf wide bookshelf, but then it's got vertical slots in the top. It's got a whole bunch of little pigeonholes, like an old-fashioned bureau, but then it's got a drop-down front leaf. So it folds up to the top, and it takes up no more room than an actual bookcase would off the wall, but then the leaf folds down, and then you've got a desk to write on. So it's not like a deep bureau. It's quite a narrow one that doesn't take up a whole lot of space. This chair takes up more space than the bureau.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
So it does work, and it's got a little drawer underneath to put little bits that you're supposed to keep in.
That sounds perfect. I'm now thinking of like all the ways I can adapt my bookshelves in order to make it work, and it's like
it wouldn't be difficult. It's just a couple of hinge joints and the things. I'll send you a photo.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Holly, do you need a bureau as well?
I mean, I would need somewhere to put a bureau, first of all. I would be very excited to have one. My son actually has a shed he was bought a shed a few years ago because he was really into art, and particularly he liked doing like graffiti art and kind of using spray cans. We were like, well, we can't have that in the house. So his grandparents bought a shed for him to turn into an art studio. And he used it about 3 times before he lost interest in art and decided to go off and do other things. And now I have a shed in my garden, which is still his and still full of his stuff, which is fine. He owns it. But I do wish that we could come to some arrangement where maybe I could use it to have a little desk space. And I have dropped many hints, but as of yet, they've not been picked up. So, but we'll see. I might have to buy another shed to go next to his shed that he's not currently using and put one in there.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Yeah, for anybody who is like tuned in, comment on whether you think that the Tinsley garden needs another shed, or whether you think that the current shed should have a desk for Holly. And then we can, whoever wins in the amount of
whether
votes,
Frasier needs to adapt a bookshelf.
Yes, yeah. Send us your results in the comments, and then we can get onto it. We can get it sorted. Holly, we are hopefully going to prove now that there's no such thing as a stupid question. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to be doing and about what we're going to be chatting about.
Okie dokie, I will. So we are once again going to go through some questions that we've had from people who have been on the social media and dropped us messages. The kind of questions that most authors will come across, whether they are new to the industry or if they've been in it for a while. Funny that Jenny actually just mentioned about things like the Discord and the support of others in the writer journey, because that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. We're going to be talking about beta readers. We're going to be talking about what they are and what they do, how do you find them, how to lay out some ground rules and set expectations, and then how to deal with maybe some of the more negative experiences and how you can turn those into something constructive. So to start off, let's just talk a little bit about beta readers and what they are. So for anyone that is new to writing or hasn't heard the term before, your beta readers are your team who will read your book in its early stages, and they will give you feedback in terms of your story development, your characters. They'll look for things like plot holes or errors that you've made that maybe just need a little bit of explaining or timing up. And they will then give you their feedback, and you can then work on it before your book goes to either your editor or your alpha readers, depending on what team you've got together. So to kick us off, Jenny, how do you find beta readers, first of all? Like, where do you source them from?
My D&D group. Originally, I tried some groups online. I wouldn't say that was a positive experience. It was positive in that everybody validated me or ghosted me. And the book that I put out to them wasn't ready and wasn't in a fit state and should never have been read by anybody. But it was my first book at that point in time. And therefore, it was, we are fragile about our first books and everything else. So I certainly started there. Whilst some of it I don't think was constructive, and it led to me actually querying that book when it should never have been queried, because people are, oh yeah, this is good, this. It did give me my editor, and I've been with my editor since then, because she started out by doing beta reading, and then she's done all her editorial qualifications whilst I've been doing my writing. So not for me, just generally because that's what she was doing anyway. But it means that we've, as a team, have grown together very much. And so I got her from there, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But I wouldn't say any of the other feedback I had off them was positive. These days, I get that from connections that I've made. People who have enjoyed reading my stuff, but have been honest about things as well, I would say. So but I'm only half joking when I say my D&D group, because actually 2 of them are. One of them mentioned in an earlier episode. Alex really reads, is my first reader. And then some of the others have come from my D&D group that they will look at it. One of them is an editor for other people, but beta reads for me. So I get that extra layer of feedback then from them. So I tend to have, I have a 3-layer. So I have 1 row, then I have 2 or 3 that I'll read in the middle. And then I'll do another round of edits. And then it'll go to one last reader before it goes to my editor. Sometimes it's the other way around, because that last reader then picks up the loose typos and things like that. So it depends which way round I feel it needs that last person. And last time, my mum decided she wanted to beta read, which was interesting because she picks up completely different stuff. That was quite an experience. That's because it was for unfamiliared. So, but she'll often read my books and come back to me and go, "Did you mean to do this?" And it's like, yes, or no. It's too late. It's published now. So, yeah. I've collected them over the last 5 or 6 years, and I now completely trial and error. Some people have read for me and just given me lovely positive feedback, and I'm kind of like, I don't want that. I want you to actually pick holes in this. But I've been doing it long enough that I am quite happy to trust these people to pick the right holes in it, not just to pick holes. As you said, you're still working through it. There's going to be issues. You need the big issues picked up that you've got to go away and work on. There's definitely a level of trust involved.
Yeah.
With beta readers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just
Definitely.
collected them.
Yeah.
Collected them along the way. Different people for different books as well. Sometimes. I have a couple. I have 1 different reader that I would throw shorter books to.
That's cool. Have you found, Jenny, that it's gotten easier to like send your stuff to beta readers? Because the first time I ever sent something to a beta reader, I was terrified. It was like my nerves were on edge. I was really like, oh, how's this? I don't. Whereas now,
No,
when
because
you've
I'm
got...
still convinced they'll hate it.
Yeah.
I'm still convinced it's rubbish until I hear back. Like Gates, I shelved Gates for years. And then I went out and bought the graphic tablet and I started drawing the maps. I was like, clearly I'm going to redo this. And I gave it to somebody, one of my other beta readers, and I said, can you tell me if this is crap? Is this worth re-editing? And my editor had been saying the whole time, it's wonderful, you need to publish it. And I'm like, no. But having that person who I'd already trusted to go through other books, turn around and go, yes, but if you tighten this bit up, and you tighten this bit up, and you tighten this bit up, it's like, oh, okay, it's all right then. But it depends what, yeah, I think it's still nerve-wracking. I don't think that ever gets easier. Every time you write something, you're scared that it's not going to be as good as you think it is. I've currently stopped a project at 60,000 words because I've convinced myself it's rubbish. And one of my beta readers has stepped in and gone, I will read that for you and tell you whether it's okay. And so I have said, okay, you can do that, because if it is, then I will pick it back up after I finish Gates. I will probably pick it up anyway because it's still bugging me, which is a really self-contained joke that only I know why that's funny. But yeah. Sorry. I don't think it gets easier. I think learning to accept the criticism gets easier because you're used to doing it and you know that they mean it in a way that is going to help your story, especially once you trust them and you know them. Those first few reads are scary, though, when you don't necessarily know whether you trust them. And when they come back and say lovely things and the next person tears it to pieces, it's learning to filter what you need to do as opposed to what someone sees as their vision for the story instead of yours.
Yeah, Yeah, I think you made a really good point earlier as well, is that beta readers are not validators. They're not just people that are there to make you feel good about what you've written. They're there to be honest, and they're there to give you the feedback that will change the story, you know?
I think that's a key point as well when we talk about the nerves and the fact that, you know, we all feel nervous about sending someone a piece of work that we're like, oh, this is rubbish, it's not ready. I mean, of course it's not ready. That's if you were sending out a perfectly polished manuscript to beta readers, then you wouldn't need the beta readers.
No.
So it's about getting into that comfort zone where you think, okay, I have to be okay with showing someone something that I don't think is good enough. And I actually think that's very good for an author to do.
Yeah. Having that level of, I mean, that the first few arcs I sent out, I mean, I know they come out from TradPub in all sorts of formatting messes and all sorts of issues and things like that. My first ones have been proofread, double checked, triplicate checked, and I was like, they weren't arcs, they were final copies. Whereas now I will send arcs out to people I know we're out of beta readers here, but people I know will know their arcs and appreciate that they are arcs. There may be a couple of typos that slip and things in order to get those early reviews building.
Yeah.
Because I like 2 to 3 month run-in between cover release and that's just the way I like to do things.
Yeah, I think as well, like if you look at the trad process and compare it to the indie process, beta readers are just part of every author's process. Because if you look in the acknowledgements of pretty much every book that has been published, trad or indie, you will find people who have read early versions of that book that are thanked in the acknowledgements. So it's like, it's not a case whereby beta readers is an indie only thing. This is something that is just part of the writing process. And I know for me, like my writing process didn't actually, my writing didn't, it was on a very slow incline of progress until I found beta readers. And the beta readers kind of accelerated my own abilities and my own skill set, because what I learned from their feedback was all of my weaknesses as a writer, which meant I could work on it, which meant that I leveled up immediately. And I think that's one of the things when you're getting feedback that's honest, that is pointing out the weaknesses in your writing. It's a learning experience for you, but it leads you to become a better writer. And I think that's one of the really beautiful, maybe we don't talk about it enough in the writing community, but you know, it's one of the beautiful things about beta readers is that they see you for all your weaknesses, but they help you to improve them. It's just great.
The toughest beta feedback I ever had stopped me writing for about 3 days because I was in pieces, but it was the best feedback I ever had. So, you know, it was tough, it was critical. When we talk about it later, and that particular reader said, I didn't actually say that, did I? I was like, yeah, you did. But you needed to. Somebody needed to.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
I want to kind of, because I do want to talk about how to deal with the negatives, but before we kind of go into that too far, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the technicalities of how beta reading works, so that anyone who is looking to do this as a new writer can start to put together a team. So my question for both of you really is, how many beta readers do you tend to use? And also, how important is it that you have a pre-existing relationship, or not important is it for you?
For me, it's crucial because there's a level of trust. And I almost don't want to say it, but I'm going to. In the current environment of AI generation and everything else like that, and AI generated text, I need to know that the people I'm sending my copy in a format that could be fed into something else aren't going to feed it to anywhere, that they are going to read it themselves, and that they are absolutely someone I know and trust. And these days, I don't think I would be accepting beta readers that I didn't know who they were. Even if they volunteered, unless they came with strong recommendations from somebody else, I don't think I would be willing to do that, because there's just too much else at play going on right now in the wider community, I think, and in the wider sphere of writing and AI related stuff. And I realise that's probably a bit of a fear, but it's far more likely than any of the old fears of, oh, someone will copy your work. They could now.
Yeah.
So for me, it's knowing them. I use different beta readers for slightly different things. So what I ask them to do is different. So I have a specific requirements from different beta readers to look at different things. Overall, everything, and then specific focuses. One who's very good at picking up any romance threads. Not that I write much romance, but if there is anything that's in there, to make sure it's not closed or to make sure it's properly fed in, it's not too fast. Another one who will look at structure and things, and just someone who will pound through it at full speed so that I get the fastest feedback possible, so that I know that it's actually okay, and I can then just wait patiently for the others for the next month.
So when you do that, then Jenny, when you go through that process with those beta readers, do you send them, like, do you have a structure for what you ask them to do? Because I've seen, some authors will send out like a questionnaire and say, what do you think of character? What do you think of storyline? Or do you kind of give them more of a, free will to go where they want and give you what feedback they think is more pertinent?
It's varied on the book, I think. With some of them where I felt like I had spaces I wanted double checking on, I've put some questions with it. So that I want you to keep this particular thing in mind. So not necessarily say, does this do this? But I want you to have a particular eye on this character's arc, this relationship, this thing here. And I want you to be looking at those things and feedback on those, along with anything else you spot. So it can be specific kind of arcs or sub-arcs or things that maybe that first person flying through, especially in the second round of beta readers, that first person flying through has gone this, and this, and I've dived in and fixed those bits, and then I've sent it back out again. That time I've got specific targets that I want to make sure that I've mended and dealt with. One of them just doesn't have any brief but looks for plot holes and picks up the smallest and the biggest and the tiniest and the things that you just don't even think about sometimes, and they pick up all these little bits that you're like, oh yeah, well, that's a really good point. Just so, but that's because they work really well as a team. But when I've done it for other people, sometimes they've given me a very specific list of questions, and I always end up diverging from that because I'll find other things when I'm reading. So I am the beta reader that will respond at the end of each chapter sometimes, and go, this was good, I liked this was good, that was really good, this is how I'm feeling. I write it down as an email, and I'll write, this is how I'm feeling at the end of this chapter. This is whether this is what you want me to be feeling, I don't know, but this is how I'm feeling about this plot line. This is what I'm thinking might be what's happening. So I will kind of, when I'm doing it for other people who know that that's the way my brain processes books, because I can usually beta read a book in a week. So I'll go through at that sort of speed, but I'll just make those notes going, I think he might be about to do this. And if that's not something, but why has he done this? And that doesn't make sense. But one of my readers does do that back to me, which is really nice, because then I'm kind of like, yay. One of them tends to get quite critical, but that's fine. I know it's meant with love. They forget to do the yay bits and do the critical bits, but it's lovely. It's fine. I know it's meant with love.
I think you've raised like a few things there that like cross over with me, Jenny, and that really sort of really resonate with my process too. In that, you've got different things that beta readers will have, different strengths that they will have. So I think the thing with a beta reader is that if you're trying to find them, find them among your writing peers, find other writers that understand the craft of writing and storytelling, who will be willing to read, maybe do a trade with you, that kind of thing. That's a good way to begin a relationship with a beta reader, someone who's a friend, that kind of thing. But understand what their strengths are as a reader. It might take you a couple of different passes to understand that. Maybe you have to work on a couple of different novels before you understand what their particular strength is. But the more open feedback you can start with in your relationship with them, the easier it will be to see their strengths. Because if you're giving them a big prescriptive list of, I'm looking for this, 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 and this, then it's not really giving them the scope to show you how they're enjoying the story, how they're feeling about the story, what their experience is with that story. So when I'm trying out a new beta reader, I'll give them very little instruction, and I'll just say, look, I just want to know how you feel about the different characters and the story in general. But when there's a beta reader that you understand what their strengths are, you can then play to those strengths and say, right, I really want your input on this or on this. And that takes time. You can't expect to just go from 0 beta readers to 10 really good ones overnight. You need to have that process of working with somebody. It's a relationship that is going to progress and develop across your career. So don't expect instant wins from beta readers. You will get the wins and they will come, but you just have to be patient and wait for it, because otherwise, I think people's expectations is that there are so many of these like beta groups out there that they can just go and pick up some beta readers and get some feedback. That's not necessarily always a productive thing. The best beta readers that I've had are the same as you, Jenny. They're the ones that I trust to be honest. They're the ones that I trust will give me exactly what is right and what is wrong with the book, so that I know how to fix it.
Trading, I think, as you say, is a good opening. If you're new to it and you're trying to find your first ones, trading is a good place to start. I still trade now. Every now and then, if I want some fresh eyes, I still trade now. I traded this autumn. I think I traded on Gates of Sorrow with somebody. Which was a different reader, someone I trusted, but a slightly different set of eyes. Just because on that occasion, it's kind of like somebody I trust, but not necessarily who will immediately pick up my book. And if it's going out into the wider readership, I want to just see how this will be received by somebody else.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always try to do with beta readers is I try to get people who will give me good feedback about the story and whether they like it and how it feels, but also to try and get people who are what I would call subject matter experts. So, you know, if you're writing a book that's about steam railways of the 1900s, you absolutely do not want to wait until you get to the point of publishing to send it out to somebody who knows about steam railways, who's going to turn around and say, well, actually, you've got all of these models wrong, and this didn't exist until 1956. So you've got something that is real world based that you want to get like clarification on, or you just want somebody to sense check it. Absolutely try and diversify your beta team so that you have got not just subject matter experts, but also just a diverse range of people, ages, backgrounds, because everyone's going to bring in a different perspective and read something in a different way. So one of the things that I want to jump on now is just a little bit about setting expectations with beta readers, because we love beta readers. They're amazing. They do amazing things. But there is nothing more frustrating than waiting and waiting and waiting. And 6 months later, you still haven't heard from someone who's got your book. So in terms of setting expectations, what is okay for an author to do? What is not okay? You know, do we give timelines? Do you give guidelines?
I do. And if people can't meet it, that's fine, but just let me know so I can fill somebody else in that space. I try and work to have a book out within 12 months of the last one. I've done 2 this year. So I work on a timeline. That means my editing slot is already in on that timeline. That means my cover release date has a spot on that timeline. I'm not waiting 6 months down the line for somebody to get back to me. So I would speak in advance as to and pre-warn when I'm expecting to deliver the copy for beta readers, and then agree with them a timescale that they think they can get it back in. And most of the time, I would aim for that to be under 2 months. Because at that point, I know some of them will already be back within 2 weeks. And I can start fixing anything massive that shows up. And then by the time we get the last ones in, they're normally reiterating things I've fixed or possibly picking up smaller issues that have been missed by other people, and they're easier to fix. So I don't sit there and ignore it for 2 months. I know I should put it to one side, but I don't tend to. As soon as I have the first feedback, I start looking at it. If it's something I feel I either disagree with or it's come from left field and I'm like, I didn't see that coming, I won't touch it until more than one person said it. Because it might just be that, as you say, if you've got a wide enough range of people, people are going to come at it from different sides, and somebody might see something that other people don't. But I normally do say 2 months if you can do it. If you can't fit it in this window, just be honest with me and tell me that you can't do it this time.
Yeah, I have a similar thing, Jenny, where I give a time frame, but the way I structure that time frame is that because beta readers aren't just readers, it's not all that they're doing, they have a life as well.
No.
I always build an extra bit of time frame in. So if I know that I want it back
Don't give that away.
within 2 months, I'll be like, oh, sorry, buffer time. That's what I call it. I build in some buffer time. So basically, it just gives them the little bit of space so that if something goes wrong, it's not a case whereby they will have delayed me or anything like that. It just gives them a little bit of extra. So if I give them a date, it's always there's always a bit of a buffer within that.
There's always a buffer. Yeah, you have to. You can't, as you say, people aren't robots, sorry. But we're back to AI. People aren't robots, they have lives, they have other things that can come up. Depending on the time of year, there can be other events that happen. And if people can't make it, they just can't do it because of other commitments. It's just life. That's what happens sometimes. It's not something that an author should take personally. If they can't finish it because they absolutely didn't like it, then I would hope that they'd tell me that. I mean, I did have one reader say they beta read The Skin in the Pact. They tried Gates Hope and went, this isn't right. This isn't my area. I'm going to withdraw for this series. It's like, it's fine. Absolutely fine.
Yeah. My
I would much rather they said that.
My thing that you said earlier about wanting about the harsh criticism being the one that was the most useful. The thing that I always say up front to beta readers is my expectation of you. So my requirement for you to be a beta reader is that your feedback has to be absolutely as brutally honest as possible in the don't try and flower it up, give it to me straight. Just tell me what you think, and I don't mind if you hate it. It is useful and helpful for me to know that you hate it and why. So just give me that, and that is basically my expectation. So the logistics of getting it back at certain times and everything like that, and trying to, prompt a reader and different things like that is one side of it, but all of that is going to mean nothing if the feedback isn't useful at the end of the day. So don't rush a beta reader to fit your schedule. Instead, just make sure that the feedback that you get from them is absolutely right. And that means that puts an onus on you as the writer to give them the space and time to be able to do that for you. So yeah, it's a very mutual kind of relationship that you have with your beta readers, because you love them because they are diamonds, they are gems, they are the unsung heroes of the writing community. But at the same time, you've got to be doing things for them. It's not just all them doing it for you. So it's being fair with them I think is a really important thing, because you're expecting them to be fair with you.
So I'm interested to hear, because I know that both of you have written short story collections or been involved with them, and you've also obviously both written novels as well. So does your beta team differ for short stories collections as it would to like novels? Do you use the same beta readers? How does that process differ or not?
I'm always looking
on the story.
Yeah, it does. I'm always looking to expand my beta team. So I'm always I've got some great beta readers who I love. I've worked with them for years and they're amazing, but I don't want to put too much on them. So I will always say, look, if it's too much, please don't worry about it. But that means that I'm always wanting to get fresh eyes, because then you're learning new things from new people. So for some of the short stories I found is a great way to test out beta readers, because if you give them a whole novel, it's an awful lot of commitment to expect and to learn how someone gives you feedback. You give them a short story of like 10,000 words, you get a really good glimpse as to what they're going to be like as a beta reader. And I found that's helped me to expand my team of beta readers by doing the short stories. So, but like Jenny just said, it's all story dependent, because what's right for one person is not going to be right for another. So but don't write stories for your betas, because otherwise you're just going to be writing the same book over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely, it does really depend. Short stories don't tend to go through as many people for me. The one that Flame Tree published only went through 2 people. I just felt the story was right, and it was right. Short stories tend to be less, they can have their own complexities, but there's less possibility that there's a massive plot hole in it, I think. So, and the people who did look at it would have spotted it. Yeah, I mean, the big collaborative one that we did, we kind of looked at each other's, really, back in Skybreaker. And other shorts for me, they tend to be very much me, maybe one particular reader, and then my editor. They still go through my editor, my short stories.
Yeah, I think it was quite good as well. I think when we did, I mean, this is talking more about when you're collaborating with authors. When we did Skybreaker, the fact that we were a group of authors meant that we could all break off into little splinter groups and kind of beta read for each other. And that's great, because there are people in that group who beta read for me now as a continuation of that.
I would never put a piece of swordplay out without asking Lee to look at it. And Damo's looked at my work on guns. So if I've involved, there are people from there that I wouldn't ask them to read the whole book, but I will take scenes out and say, can you check, like you were saying earlier, can you check this actually makes sense? I've not done something weird that's wrong with the weaponry here that isn't appropriate, or that they physically couldn't do that move or maneuver. And there are people who specialize in checking stuff like that.
Absolutely. Like I say, it's all about getting those subject matter experts.
Yes, you're right.
I want to kind of just, to wrap this up, jump a little bit into, we were talking earlier about some of the kind of the negatives of getting critical feedback, how to manage that. Beta reader overwhelm. So, there's so many beta readers, they're reading your book and going to have a different opinion. So how do you pick out what you change, what you absorb and what you take in, if every one of your beta readers says something different to you?
I think my gut knows if they're right. I think sometimes I can't speak for other people, so I shouldn't. Sometimes I write something and I almost think, I wonder if I can get away without doing that bit. Or I can get away with this. And then you get it back and someone flags it up and you're like, oh, you might be the only one who spotted it, but I know you're right. I do need to fix that. And if I look at it critically and go, yeah, you know what? If 2 of you have picked that up, then that's that proportion of readers. Yeah. Sometimes I look at it and I look at where they're coming from and I'm like, no. Actually, no, you've not got something I wrote previously, or you've missed something I wrote previously, because I have addressed this already. So I think you can't change everything to fit every comment said by a beta reader, or you will no longer be writing your book, you'll be writing theirs. And I think I read or heard some really good advice somewhere that said that if beta readers are spotting a problem, then there may be a problem, but you should not take their solution. You should work out what the solution is, but you should not automatically take what they think the solution should be.
Totally. I feel like there's an element of subjectivity about feedback which you need to develop a filter for. So, if for example someone gets back to beta feedback on Jenny's book and they were like, less selfies in this scene, and another reader got back and said more selkies in this scene,
Yeah.
it's subjective, right? But if somebody said, right, okay, what you've done in this scene has an impact later on, and it doesn't feel like that's a natural transition from there to there, that's totally different. So you've got to develop that filter of what is the problem with the book, or is it just the subjectivity of the reader and their preferences. Personally, I have this rule of, if you've got like a consensus among beta readers that something isn't working, it's usually not working. So if I get multiple comments that are on the same sorts of thing, great. If I get beta feedback that contradicts each other, I have to just look at that and say, how much of this is subjectivity, and try and use my filter. And if I get somebody who really likes something and that kind of thing isn't strong enough for somebody else, then I'm going to go for that out of the two. So like if somebody says, oh, I really like the way you did this, but somebody else says, well, it didn't quite land it well enough for me, I think it needs to be a little bit more, I'm always going to err towards that person than the person that said, oh, that worked brilliantly. Because I'm always going to look and say, well, does it need to be stronger? Could it be stronger in one way or another? So it's a beta feedback for me. It's all about, it's not just challenging the feedback, but it's also challenging the story with the feedback and asking that question of, actually, does it make it stronger or not? Because there'll be a lot of feedback that you get that won't strengthen your manuscript. And at that point, what's the point of doing all the work to change it? Just as long as it's strengthening the story, it's valuable. So that's my approach to beta comments. But yeah, just develop that filter, because without that filter, like Jenny says, you're going to be changing the manuscript from week to week as the feedback comes in, and you're going to have like 8 different versions of the same book, and they're all going to be the same. They're not going to be stronger or better. They're just going to be variations.
Okay, so quick fire round. We're going to wrap this up with, we're going to go Jenny, Frasier, me, because it gives me more time to think. Top tip for building a great beta reader team. What's your number one tip?
Talk to people, make friends, read lots, find authors you like, whose books you like, who are nice people. Probably not a great tip, but it's the way I've done it.
It's a great tip. I'm like, what have you left for the rest of us, Jenny? I'm going to go with, if you want a good beta reader, be a good beta reader. Find ways of being able to give back to the people who are doing it for you, because if you're expecting everyone to read your book and you're not willing to read theirs, then you're only going to have a very limited shelf life when it comes to getting that kind of feedback. So be a beta reader, and then you will find good ones for you.
Well, I'm going to get a bit controversial here, Frasier, because I'm not going to disagree with you, because I do very much agree with that. But I am going to caveat that with, there are more ways to give back than beta reading. So obviously, some people, they have time constraints. We can all read books when we can, but obviously sometimes we can't read as many books as we would like, or we can't read them at the time people want them to. So absolutely, Frasier is right. You do need to, it is a give and take community, but just remember, there are so many other ways that you can give, not just beta reading, but in terms of supporting authors in other ways as well. So just throwing that caveat in there. In terms of my top tip for building a beta team, I would say make sure you're giving yourself enough time as well to absorb and take in any feedback. So we mentioned about giving beta readers timelines to say, I need this back by 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, whatever it will be. Make sure you build time in yourself to not only do your rewrites, but also to just sit and just let it sit for a little while. Don't just go straight in and be like, okay, I've got to change everything now because I've got the feedback. Give yourself that breathing room. That's my tip, which I learned from experience.
Fantastic tips, everybody. Fantastic insights. Thank you so much for joining us, Jenny, and thank you so much for helping us to get to the bottom of the beta reading debacle. That was fantastic. Just for anybody who's enjoyed having you in the spotlight over these past few weeks, where can they reach out to find you?
Hannaford Jenny at Blue Sky, or via my website. I'm disappearing off camera again. Hannaford, JE Hannaford.com is a good place to start. And there's loads of links on there.
Fantastic. So, thank you so much for joining us, Jenny. It's been such a pleasure to have you in the spotlight, and all of the best with everything that lies ahead for you.
Thank you.
And next time, tune in where there'll be another guest who will be helping us with some good news and rolling for insight and helping us to show that there's no such thing as a stupid question. Thank you from all of us here, and keep reading, keep writing, keep being awesome.
Bye.